Here we go. Good morning. It's just past 9 a.m. in Portland, Oregon on Friday, the 31st of July, 2026. And I'm coming to you relatively live, depending on the packet latency, through magical sounds that we taught to count. I'm Dan Hon, and this is How People Work Live, episode 4 with Russell Davies. How People Work Live is a live show based on my workshop for helping teams become more effective, focusing getting you hard results by teaching and practicing the soft skills you don't get taught. Over 4 weeks, I work with cohorts to help them improve their relationships with other people, whether that's co-workers, teams, managers, stakeholders, customers, and ultimately anyone they work with. We learn how to understand where and to whom we need to be influential and how to do it without being icky, and practice how to communicate clearly and succinctly to give your work the best chance of succeeding. And then when we've done all of that, we wrap it all up, tying it into your organization strategy, whether you have one or not. This episode, I'm very happy to have Russell Davies with me. Russell is a writer and strategist who spent over 40 years thinking about what happens when marketing and services meet the internet. If you read his bio, there's actually a footnote there. He's worked on communications and digital strategies for organizations like Honda, Nike, Microsoft, Apple, the organizing committee of the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games, which was the best Olympic and Paralympic Games, the UK's government digital service, and the co-op. And if you work in or close to technology and government, there is a very good chance that you've heard of the GDS design principles, probably the best expression of the strategic work that Russell has been involved in there. Crucially, I will remind everyone that Russell has not spent the last 40 years thinking very hard about what happens when the BBC wants to bring Doctor Who back. That is a different Russell Davies, one who has more T in their name. You want a different YouTube channel, lots of different YouTube channels for that, a lot. Russell is one of the few people I know who, I was going to say still have a typepad domain in their URL, but you don't, because you moved it because everything gets old and dies. Because Russell's been blogging regularly since 2003, and as a particularly prolific person with whom I maintain a healthy professional jealousy, Russell also organizes the Interesting Conference, has written a book about Great British Cafes, also one about PowerPoint, had his work featured at MoMA in New York and the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition, and he's currently marketing and product director for the Modern House and all of that, and he's also making Instagram reels now and TikToks and everything. Here's how the show works. It's a bit like an open panel. Russell and I are going to start talking about how people work. That's the name of the show. And as you've got questions or observations, throw them into chat or raise your hand in Zoom if you can find where they've hidden it this week. I'll be paying attention and keeping track of the order of questions and call on you. Hi, Russell.
Hello, Dan.
We've known each other a very, very long time, maybe about half the time that you've been thinking about what happens when marketing and services meet the internet. And we were just chatting before I let everyone in about what we might talk about. And because there's a lot, I was thinking about how, at least how much of my work when I'm doing the workshop is about getting people to slow down and read what they've written and how important writing is. Because you've also been talking about you've been talking about PowerPoints for a long time. We should slow down. Should we slow down?
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, let me say that the 2012 Olympic Games weren't the best ones because of me. That I should just,
No,
make
no,
that
yeah,
make
I
that
would make
clear.
that clear as well. They were
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
I do not think that they were the best ones because of Russell either,
yeah, yeah.
especially not.
I
Um,
made I made the sponsorship of the torch relay slightly worse. That would be my contribution to the 2012 Olympic Games. So,
Slightly
uh,
worse.
yeah,
Anyway, we'll move on from that.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting time to be talking about like the effort that goes into writing, right?
Yeah.
That is the topic du jour, I would say. And um, now more than ever, um, writing short is proof of work.
Right.
And that I had engineer who works for me. a little while ago wanted to implement something on the site, and I said, "Oh, can you write me a note? Just because I need to get it clear in my head. Can you write me a note explaining what you want to do, and also I can share that with my boss and stuff." And suspiciously quickly, he wrote me a note and sent it to me. And I said, sorry, I have not been clear about the brief here. What I want you to do is think about this, come to some conclusions, construct a reasonable argument, and then write it down and send it to me. And I think it is fair that to say that that was sort of my fault. It's like because embedded in write a note used to be think about it,
Do that. Yeah.
like do all this bunch of stuff.
Right.
It wasn't like generate some words,
Yeah.
which is now the answer to write a note. And I think that the whole prompting thing, the joy of that is a loads of those assumptions about what we mean when we say do a thing. We now have to unpack and be clear about what we mean when we say do a thing in a way that we didn't before. And that's, yeah, I quite enjoy that. So when we say write a presentation, we don't mean generate some slides. We mean think for a really long time about, some things and then think for an even longer time about how to express them well. You know, that's, yeah. And it takes work.
It's
And
really,
Sitting there has written a fantastic thing about how, as an employer or a boss or whatever, you need to give people time to do that.
yes. Well, maybe if Ella indicates in chat later that she'll be happy talking about that, then she could talk about that. But she doesn't have to because I have not invited her on the show, and that would be putting someone on the spot without their consent, which is not a thing that we do these days. Otherwise, it would be like a surprise phone-in call on a radio show, which we're not going to do. Um, I found it really so the whole thing about breaking it down, as you were describing that, it felt like there was a time I'm gonna like conjure up a stereotypical nostalgic 1950s, you know, can you please write me a memo about something? And a memo, at least for me, would mean something different. And it means to me, I get an idea of something that's much more longer form and thought out. It is kind of funny. I remember there was a blog post that went around, or this kind of idea that went around when people discovered that Jeff Bezos likes people to write things down and to explain things and then think about them. And then suddenly that got copied and pasted around. And now everyone's like, it got compressed into this meeting could have been an email, but then the email, I think,
Well,
turned into something that wasn't an email. And the object is just to get the words out.
yeah, I think I've got views on the whole Bezos thing. I mean, to me, like um, clearly, like a short vertical document has, full of words, has rhetorical and persuasive power. So
Yeah.
does, big words on a screen with a person standing in front of them. They are different things and they do different jobs. I think that's the big thing. And a lot of what Bezos was saying is, I prefer the first because I don't like meeting people.
Right,
You know,
which is a completely different which is a completely different kind of thing, I think.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, and it felt like periodically, basically, CEOs ban PowerPoint, and it's and the press reports it because they're the other people who hate PowerPoint, like journalists or the other people who hate PowerPoint,
mhm.
and it's almost always just power. It's just I don't want junior people wasting my time. I want junior people to write a thing that they send to medium people, and then the medium people tell me what they said. And it's kind of whereas presentations enable the powerless people to stand up and say stuff. And that's, CEOs don't like that.
I see Ella did say make it shorter is the classic Russell Davis feedback in the chat. And I found that when I'm working with teams, or actually any project that I'm working on, when it's time to review something like a presentation, I can quite patiently ask when we've got the time for it is, can you tell me what this means for any particular sentence? And hopefully people don't get too flustered, or I can make it okay for them to say, you know what, that doesn't actually mean anything. And then we can slowly, like you say, kind of take the time to get through it. Like Jock's talking about, I didn't have time to write a short letter. I find it, have you, have, so we can kind of just jump straight into it. Have you tried, and what has it been like when you've used something like Claude or OpenAI or ChatGPT to make words?
I mean, I've done the same experiments, the same mucking about as most people, I would say. I've tried to, I've uploaded the book and asked it to turn it into a skill,
Yeah.
which it does quite well. It points out all the contradictions in the book, so I had to write, what do you want? I contain multitudes. Um, so, um, but it weirdly, I mean, it's still incredibly verbose,
Yeah.
um, and doesn't get rhythm, doesn't
No.
get like slide rhythm. Um, but also, I suspect, doesn't get, well, it writes stuff. And to me, it's quite like me, but not as good as me.
Yes.
But I suspect to other people, it's as good as me. It's just,
Yes.
I wrote a slide, so I think it's better, because I wrote it. Um, but I don't know. It's like loads of this stuff. It's not as good as a good thing, but it's better than
Better
most things.
than most things, but not as good as the good thing that
Yeah,
hopefully
yeah. I
you
mean,
can still put.
years and years ago, when I was still at a UK renewable energy provider called Octopus, sort of probably just after ChatGPT came out,
Mhm.
they asked me to look at a bunch of customer service emails and go, could we theoretically start replying with LLMs to our customer service emails? So I
Right.
took a bunch of conversations that we had had via email with customers and had the actual response from a human operator and the ChatGPT response. And the ChatGPT response was way more humane, sympathetic,
Mhm.
um, took more time, paid more
Patient.
attention
Right.
to the patient. Yeah. I mean, and utterly wrong. Like just kind of saying, you can do this, we'll give you this money. Like, it's just giving away money all the time. Um, but but as a customer, I would have been delighted to receive those because you're not comparing it with, Ella writing your emails. You're comparing it with a overworked, underpaid human operator who's just trying to get to the next email. So they go,
Right.
yeah, sorry about your dad, you know, here's 50 quid,
Yeah.
and it's that's the difficult bit, right?
I found I would have liked to have thought that and I've had the same experience. So I gave it all of my newsletters and and tried to see what it could do, and then I think the end result, just to call back to Douglas Adams, because I will invariably do that if you run me long enough. It's like it comes back with writing that is not quite. It's like the tea thing. It's like not entirely unlike completely what I might do, but also just not like you can drink it, I suppose, and it's better than not having something to drink. The I try to use it as something that would be like a rubber duck for me. So explicitly saying, don't write anything for me, but help me think through this thing as if you're asking me the dumb questions. And I wonder about that as well, because that also felt frustrating because it was asking the wrong kind of dumb questions of me.
Yeah, yeah. I also think I just do think that for the next 3 to 5 years, no one's going to read anything. Like, why would you bother reading anything at the moment? Because it's all rubbish, you know. And that might get fixed at some point.
Fingers
There
crossed.
may, yeah. But I mean, it's partly why I started making videos. It's it's because it's reasonably clear that the person talking is me. And like it would be a bad use of data center resources to replicate me.
It's not a
Um,
challenge for anyone.
yeah. So I mean, and I know that will and is possible and will be more possible, but um, I think a lot of people are going, you know what, it's too hard to sort the wheat from the chaff, and neither the wheat nor the chaff are that great anyway. So, I'll do something else with my time. Um,
And when you're doing that, when you're doing that thinking, when anyone is doing, hopefully doing that thinking to make it shorter and actually think through things. I mean, I remember when I talk to people and then they show me what they've written, much like the note that your engineer wrote to you. Um, there's the meme for that, which is when you take a look at something very long, it's like, I don't like, is that good? Whether that's good or whether that's bad, I'm happy for you either way. Um, I try to point out, imagine being the recipient of that email, and to put yourself in the place of someone who's reading it. And you probably didn't even have the time to read, like you didn't have the time to write it in the first place, so you tried to do it as quickly as possible. You didn't have the time to think about it. So now you're sending it to someone who also invariably probably has jobs that are similar to that or a different set of stresses. And now that you're asking them to read it as well. So how much when you think about or you talk about making it shorter and think about making a presentation for someone, how do you talk to people about the audience that they are writing for and understanding the need of the audience and the organization?
um, Honestly, not very much, I would say. Um, in that I think most things are so far from being written for like a default human that we should aim for at least getting it right for a default human before we start to worry about which human it is. Because um, you know, like it's like just writing stuff that is at the where the words are big enough to be accessible for most people is like a massive challenge before you start to worry about the nuance of are they visual learners or something. It's like um yeah, I tend to think that sort of stuff's a distraction. It's a bit like get the story straight first before we start worrying about too much of that stuff. And a lot of it is not because of poor writing skills or anything like that. It's because we're attempting to present something where we haven't made most of the decisions behind the presentation. So, like the particularly in particularly in government,
Mm-hmm.
um, Word documents didn't say anything because they could contain everything.
Right.
So they could be of an infinite length. So all options were explored. And presentations were deliberately vague, like because the language of presentations allows you to appear to talk about a subject without expressing any opinions about it. And so the stuff that took a long time, the stuff that was hard, and the the unique kind of opportunity I was given at GDS, which was like to be in charge of the presentations, meant that I would sit there and go, but what are we actually saying? We haven't decided what we're saying, so that we'd write a slide and it would say, departmental change,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the heading of departmental change, and then some bullets saying, in the forthcoming period, blah, 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 blah. And I'd be like, are we closing the department or not? We need to decide and then we need to say. And the problem wasn't really that we didn't know how to say it, it was that we
No.
hadn't decided. Um, and or if we had decided, we then didn't want to be like too blunt about it. Um, and uh, our job was to A, decide, and B, be blunt. Um, and that's really, that makes it a lot easier if you've got that. And you've got, and so like writing presentations would take days because we were making the decisions,
Right.
you know.
And that's, I definitely see that. That's part of the feedback process, right? So you would draft, someone would draft a deck and then they would send it to someone else, and then feedback would be, but I don't think we should do that, which is not necessarily, which to your point right at the very beginning, that's not a feedback on the deck. That's feedback on what we're going to do and whether we're going to do it.
Yeah. And it became very clear. It was like we would present stuff, and then people either like agreed or disagreed, but they couldn't say they hadn't been told, you know. And they may choose to ignore, but yeah. And I do think that's a lot of, especially because people aren't given the time to do them properly. They just sort of stand up and got a slide that said talk about this for a bit, and they do, but you don't get to either an ask or a decision something like that. That's what makes them bad. It's not PowerPoint that makes them bad. It's organizational physics.
Yeah. Okay. So wait. Okay, that's a phrase I haven't heard before. Organizational physics. I've got an idea of where it might go, but now I really, really want to know where that might go.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Or like I always, in the conversations that you've had thus far, I always think the thing that's clear as a theme is that organizations exhibit entropy, right? Like left
Hmm.
to their own devices, they get slowly worse.
Yep.
And um, what a lot of the people you've talked to do is inject energy. That's that's what a good leader or a good CEO or a good someone does is they inject energy. Sometimes it's angry energy. Um, sometimes it's joyful energy. Sometimes it's whatever, but broadly it's energy. And that's often also why I think they don't do it for very long because it's quite difficult.
Yeah. I mean, it involves expenditure of energy. I think I've
Yeah.
got a good example of, and I talked about this briefly before. It was a job that I was pulled in on to do it ended up being a turnaround, but it was a modernization of a software project, of an internal modernization, um, which curiously also had the word next gen in it. And I wrote about that yesterday in my in my newsletter about how invariably, if you've got a project that has the word next generation or next gen in it, odds are that it isn't going to succeed. And I feel like I want to think about that more, in a different place and time. And things weren't going well. There had been a plethora. I mean, I think most people can imagine there had been years of update presentations about what's happening and how the project was going that kind of obscured what was going anyway, until this new CEO came in and had enough of a spidey sense to go, are these people not necessarily lying to me, but I don't understand what's going on here? And then I had to go away. I was brought in and I talked to everyone, and then I simplified everything down to, like, I think about 5 slides or so, which is, we're not ready. Here are the choices, given that we're not ready. You can either invest money on it, or you can launch it, which some people are suggesting. So you can invest money in it and it will take more time. There's no way that you're going to have something that does what you've said, what I've learned so far that you want to do by the time you launch. So you've got another choice, which is to launch it and then be unhappy with it. And everyone was afraid of her. No one wanted to commit to saying, in one respect, we are quite fucked. And we haven't gotten as far as we wanted to. And that's not good. And they didn't want to face up, it felt, to presenting a decision that said, I know this has cost more and more and more money. We're going to have to, like, one way out of this is to ask for more money. And the CEO was understandably upset, but she did one thing that I really appreciated, which was I am very upset and I'm not very happy with the situation, right? Because we have spent a lot of money on it. And then she said, but now I know what decision I have to make as CEO. And it is my like ultimately it comes to me. I'm not happy that it had to come to me. If you all had been doing your jobs in a different way, then it needn't have gotten this far. But ultimately, I am the person who has to make this decision. Now I understand. You hid it from me, which I don't appreciate. But this is the job that I've got to do, and then now I'm going to make that decision. And that I feel like when you put it that way, that's like that was 8 years of entropy building of what I felt like, and you could see from the outside, a succession of people who were unable or unwilling to kind of inject that energy into there. Um, and I suspect
Yeah.
Yvonne's just said I loved her. I would do. Everyone was afraid of her. She came in. She had this reputation for being very very mean and very kind of abrupt. And I'm like, you but she did want to actually do the thing, and she wasn't avoiding making decisions. And she would also say like, I'm going to be angry about this, and I am angry about it, and then now we have to do something about it.
Yeah. I think there's it's also like it's really hard to how would I say it? The natural organizational tendency, I would say, and probably human tendency is to fix things with strategy. Um, and I've spent 40 years as a strategist, and strategy is useless because they're almost all right, right? Like you just need to pick one and do something. And again, that's what sort of energy is about. It's like we're going to do this because you're very rarely presented in a meeting with a bunch of options, some of which are terrible. Like they're almost always reasonable ideas, right?
Sure, we
And you
could do
just have
that.
to, yeah. And that has its own challenge, like deciding between equally attractive options is well known to be difficult. But so I worked again, like I worked for Bulb, which was a renewable energy supplier, and Octopus, which is a renewable energy supplier. They both did broadly the same thing, broadly the same way, but they had really different organizational habits. So
Mm-hmm.
around data, for instance, so when one merged into the other, Bulb went into administration and was bought by Octopus out of administration, and we had to merge customer data. So 2 million customers in Bulb. And the bulb engineering team had learnt to do basically learnt to do one thing
Mm-hmm.
extremely well.
Right.
And we were good at organic acquisition of customers, sign up journeys, like that one customer at a time, seamless experience, brilliant customer service. And their proposal for how we would merge this stuff was like spending a year making the data perfect and then transferring it over to Octopus and they would upload it and da-da. Octopus were a classic agile kind of
Mm-hmm.
business. They said, right, tomorrow we're going to merge 10 customers,
Right.
nine of them will fail. Next week, we're going to merge 100 customers. 98 of them will fail. The week after that, we're going to merge 1,000 customers. 90 of them will fail. And we were sitting there going horrified. It's like 10 customers unhappy, but they were like, that's the only way to do it.
Right.
And they were extraordinarily good at absorbing other energy companies because they had that you know a different mentality. Both approaches are valid.
Yeah.
Both approaches could have won. Um, they both started from the same place, ended up in a very different place because of probably some individuals right at the beginning,
Right.
you know. Um, and it's not like one is a bad strategy and the other is a good strategy. They're just different and they got executed.
it's like, yeah, because I was thinking about that, and both would have gotten there, like you say, in the end. They're different approaches to it. It strikes me that for the person who is going to need to decide direction, and ultimately someone who is responsible for making the decision as to which approach to take, they presumably needed to have a focus, and they needed to have at least the semblance of a, well, our overall goal is this, and we are okay if we, you know, defer, or we're okay if the priority is to, I don't know, make sure that the customer number is going up every week, and make sure that that is happening every single week rather than waiting and then waiting for a year. And
Yes, it's
right,
it's also probably actually a factor of appetite for regulatory risk,
yes,
which and they had Octopus. I say they. I've worked for both. Octopus had much greater appetite for regulatory risk because they'd captured the regulator. So it was kind of, you know, they were like, yeah, if we lose two or three here, we're okay. Whereas Bulb were much more outsiders and were therefore terrified of the regulator.
right, which comes down to, and then that I see comes down to exec leadership, and then setting a culture and making sure everyone understands, or the acquirer helps everyone understand that you've been working under this environment, and then now that we're working on this one, and
Mm,
this is why we're okay with this approach.
yeah,
We
yeah.
are aware of why you would choose a different approach, but in the context of what we're doing in our environment and how we behave, then we're perfectly comfortable with that.
It's also some of it is also, I think, part of the challenge with organizational culture stuff and organizational thinking is ultimately a lot of it comes down to people needing to know a thing you're not allowed to tell them.
Yes.
It's like if you could tell the whole organization, we don't care about the regulator because we've captured them, it would be, that would be fine. But obviously, you're not allowed to do that.
At least not write it
So
down. That's probably not a good idea.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, administration is very clarifying a lot of um, a lot of regards, and you see a lot of things that happen, like the writers were always the most scared
Yeah.
because they actually understood what people were saying. So my at one point we said the official line that we were allowed to say before Bulb went into bankruptcy was "We're not about to go bust,"
Right.
and the writers were like, "Oh, we're going bust then." And
Yeah.
everyone else was, "Oh, great, good. We're not." And then there was the official line was, "We have no plans to make any redundancies." And again, the writers were like, "Oh, redundancies then," you know. And it's just that, that like I always think like PR and HR
Mm.
are professional liars, right? And
Yeah.
but that's their job. That's official. That's okay. That's what they do. They issue communications on behalf of the corporate entity.
Hmm.
But that the influence of their language often spreads into other places where um, that is less useful.
Right. Jock just asked in the chat whether you've seen whether organizational appetite for risk, correlates to psychological safety, and so was Bulb less psychologically safe than Octopus?
God, no, I would say they were both psychologically terrified the whole time. So,
I was gonna,
um,
yeah. I was gonna say it's rarer that I've seen an organization that is psychologically safe, given I think, given the theme of what we've been talking about, the amount of sheer energy it would take to counteract the entropy of falling into sheer abject terror most of the time. Um, and
I mean, there's different forms of terror and safety risk. Like
yeah.
like at Bulb, we were the fastest growing company in Europe 2 years in a row. Like
Mhm.
that has its own terrors. Um,
Expectations.
yeah. Um, and were very and you're willing to take risk in different types of risk in different types of
Yeah.
areas, you know. So I'm not sure you could say culture A is risk averse and culture B isn't. Francis Maud, who was the minister at the Cabinet Office when I was at Government Digital Service, used to say ministers don't mind risk, they don't like surprises.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like a big that's the difference, right? We don't mind taking a risk as long as you tell me
They
we're
know they're
taking a
supposed
risk.
to, right?
Yeah,
Taking the
yeah,
risk and being responsible for the risk and making decisions, I'd even say is one of the reasons why they're attracted to the job. They want to make
yeah.
big, important decisions that will affect lots of people. And I think by definition, those are likely. My gut feeling is that those are likely to be risky decisions. The way that you're talking about it, you know, talking about risk in general in the abstract, I feel isn't particularly helpful because, like you're saying, it depends on what you are taking the risk on. It depends on the domain. It depends on the quality of the risk. I would, um, so so again, when I was working on child welfare, the secretary at the end of the day, the two different secretaries who were involved, they had gotten to the point where the risk of trying a new approach compared to what they were currently doing, they had finally reached their tolerance for that. And they were like, we will try a different thing because how much worse can it possibly get? And the other, I've told this story before about how some of the counties were, their risk profile, it was to the extent that their risk profile included it would be risky to find out how we are doing on one particular aspect. So it would be risky to do the performance measurement, for example. And then you would try and point out, okay, well, but at the same time, you want to reduce risk in this other area. And we can't really affect one without the other. And that I feel comes down to focus and prioritization, right? Like you get to decide what you are willing to take more risk on, and then that comes down to a leadership position. That's a manager or that's an exec leadership responsibility.
It's also it's probably some weird aspect of the same thing as in a sort of bike shedding thing in that so I've always worked in the least important bits of organizations, right? Like so marketing, communications, blah blah blah, where it doesn't really matter what you do, but for the most part the organization is enormously risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find yourself dealing with people who are deciding on a new ERP, and they're like,
Right.
"Yeah, let's do it." It's kind of the most significant decisions have the least attention paid to them, largely because for the most part, the people running the business don't understand them. They're either finance or marketing people, and they're asked to make consequential decisions about software or you know, that kind of thing. And they don't really know. So they happily take quite big, silly risks. Whereas in marketing land or communications, which they feel they understand, they won't do
Right.
anything,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
Which is why vibe coding is great at the C-suite level.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
um, I am
yeah.
going to, this just connected in my head, so I'm going to pull it back to PowerPoints and presentations, right? And
I
how
can't.
they are.
Can't we talk about cafes? It's
We
like I
could talk
can't
about
stop halfway.
I'm out of date. So is the shepherdess? What happened with the shepherdess?
It's still there. It got bought by some new people. They stripped out some of the quaint things like the pictures of All Saints and people from EastEnders, but it's still going. But no, there is not a there's not a cabal, a sinister cabal that meets there anymore.
For the everyone else who's here or anyone else who happens to be watching this later, the shepherdess is a how would you just like in America it would be like the dive diner. It's been so long since I've been in England that I can't remember. It's a calf. It's not a cafe. It's a
It's a
calf.
greasy
It's
spoon.
a
It's a
yeah.
calf. Yeah, yeah.
And it was near Silicon Roundabout, which was literally a joke which is a way that the British often deal with things until it becomes serious. um, Silicon Roundabout being where there were a bunch of English tech companies kind of springing up. Um, I okay, so that, but really though, the PowerPoint thing. Um, so we've got a bunch of people who don't understand the things that they should understand in order to be good at their jobs. And then you've got PowerPoint, which could be a tool to help them understand. Not the only way, but it could be a tool to help them understand and to help make clear the decisions that they need to make. And also to communicate the risks and the trade-offs in those decisions. Which brings me back to probably one of I think maybe the most well-known books about presentations, which is the space shuttle one, about how the risks were known about the O-rings and how the rubber would behave if it got really, really cold, and whether the engineers at Norton Thiokol or wherever or NASA had kind of put together this presentation that obscured the degree of risk about what would happen if they went ahead. That strikes me as a different kind of PowerPoint than the one that we've been, or presentation than the one that we've been talking about so far, which has been more about communication, because that's the one that's specifically asking for or saying a decision needs to be made. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's one of those um things. So Edward
Mm.
Tuft wrote a famous pamphlet about the cognitive style of PowerPoint. And he used the Challenger disaster, the presentation from I think the whatever it's called. I was going to say JBL, but they make speakers, don't they? The
Yeah, JPL. Yeah.
JPL engineers about the temperature, what the risk around the O-ring freezing and kind of, and he his contention was that the rhetorical style of PowerPoint, like its
Mm-hmm.
affordances,
Yeah.
kind of pushed them towards presenting data in a way that wouldn't have made the risk clear.
Mm-hmm.
Which is I mean, he had an argument he wanted to make, and he was trying to find a story that fitted it. And that sort of just about did. Because I mean, he makes his money doing
Yes.
expensive information design, and
Yeah.
PowerPoint is cheap information design.
Got his book
Um,
written.
but I mean, he's sort of also not wrong in that PowerPoint is probably a bad way to have presented that information. Um,
I
but
think that I mean, I'm pretty sure if I look it up, there's I probably wrote this will go wrong in big letters on a slide. Um, which I feel like one could have written in the presentation
yeah, yeah.
about the O-rings.
But
But that's
also
not Tuft's thing.
but also it's not culture, right? Like that's not how
Right.
engineers talk to engineers.
Yeah.
That's, engineers talk to engineers with precise drawings and tiny numbers and
Right.
and argue I can imagine that if that group of engineers had used a slightly different way of presenting that information to some other engineers, they would have communicated what they'd wanted to. So to
Yeah.
that extent, he's not wrong. But what he tried to conflate that to like everyone who uses PowerPoint is an idiot, which is not. It's a bit like it's like criticizing it for not being able to do a thing that it's not supposed to do.
Right.
Um, and but that to some extent, God, I haven't had these discussions for a long time. To some extent,
I'm very
that's
sorry.
it's all right, but PowerPoint is a victim of its own success in that
Right.
regard, and it is arguably the most successful bit of software ever. Because, and part of that is because it is used for everything. So the fact that it can do so many things, I mean, it's Turing complete.
Yeah.
The fact it can do so many things means it's very often used to do things it's not brilliant at, but can do.
It will be much
Um,
easier to use it to do things it's not brilliant at. You would have
yeah,
thought then.
yeah. But it's the software everyone has. It's the software in the UK, at least. It's the only piece of software that certainly uh, people used to be taught in schools.
Yeah.
It's it's and the product team at Microsoft have been very smart at making sure it can do everything because
Mm.
they know they've got a group of people who will use it to do everything. So um, yeah, sometimes it goes wrong.
Well, you've been talking about. I think maybe I'm remembering this right about how you can use PowerPoint as a tool. Like, so you can use it to do everything or anything. You can use it as a tool to communicate unthought through thoughts or a lack of thinking or indecision. But then that means that you can also use it as a tool to think. Can you use it as a you can use it as a tool to think?
Yeah, I mean, I do. And I think it's very like there's oh, I can't remember the name of the book. Is it the subtitle is The Women Who Built the Web?
Yeah.
Um, and it's about and one of the people covered in it is someone who was a early software inventor, engineer, who thought a lot about how um, to support thinking with software and built a thing that was like an early version of it was like a version of HyperCard, basically,
Right. Yeah.
but allowed you to move thought like graphic things around in space like you would with a molecular model. Um, so you can move thoughts closer to each other and go, oh, these two go together and blah 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 blah. And the that's the same thing that Scrivener has sort of
Yeah.
instituted in software of like index cards, that kind of. It's just a style of thought that people enjoy and find useful of like having things that you can move around spatially and put together and rearrange and things like that. And the democratic everyone in the world version of that is PowerPoint. Um, because there's they all call it all the PowerPoints, the Apple PowerPoint and the Google PowerPoint, like they've all got a version of that, light table or slide sorter or whatever. And it's a really good way to think about ideas and how to connect them and to create unexpected juxtapositions. You go, oh, that rhymes with that. That's interesting. It's and Stephen Johnson talks about his Spark files, where
Hmm.
he spent 1,000 years writing all his ideas down in a Word doc, and probably doesn't anymore, I imagine. But the my version of that is like a PowerPoint deck that I've had for probably 20 years now, with a bunch of stuff. And for me at least, a PowerPoint slide is a unit of thought. It's either some words or a picture or some words and a picture, and they're yeah, they can be polished and changed and whatever, but then it means you've got all this stuff. You never have to start a presentation from scratch, for instance. You're asked to do a presentation. It's like, oh, well, I've got some things that will help with that. And you start from there. That is good.
In that way, being able to move things around. I've tried Scrivener. There are so many. I get to say that that I have many unfinished novels and unfinished books in my drawer. Now I realize that I get to say that because I have them all in Scrivener, and it's always been difficult for me personally to use the note cards in Scrivener and everything. But
Yeah,
I
same.
do like the thing that I miss about being able to work in person is to just get everyone around a whiteboard and then just to move stuff around on the whiteboard. I never really got on with sticky notes because they kept falling off the wall, and then it doesn't ever feel like they're sticky enough. Um, but in that way, it is like the bigger point that we're making here is that the thinking is the thing, and then use the tool that helps you do the thinking.
Yeah. And I think it's probably true that Microsoft have got more people thinking about how to make it good to move cards around on a screen than Scrivener have.
Very probably.
It's kind of therefore that probably a bit of a better. I mean,
Yeah.
Microsoft aren't great at everything, but there are like making PowerPoint cards move around on a screen, probably pretty good at. And so it's just good at stuff, at some stuff, and that's one of the things it's good at, I think.
it it's one of the things that I noticed in my workshop was that so I start off with having people talk about, okay, well, who are the people that you need to persuade? Do you understand the people that you work with? You know, and I think I kind of used that. I realized it was really difficult kind of back engineering exactly how have I been working for the last 20 years and then try and turn that into a workshop. But I think the first thing that started off with was, do you realize that you're working with other human beings? And try and think about it that way, which I think ties in with one of the things that you said earlier. And then the next one is, okay, well, think about, given that they're human beings, you know, what are the things that are important to them, and then do you understand that? And then in the third bit, we get to the writing, and I feel like writing is the Trojan horse to get people into actually thinking about the decisions, because, like you say, the writing, or at least I think what you're saying is the writing comes at the end, like the good writing comes about because you've actually thought about what it is that have decided, need to decide what it is that you're actually going to do and being able to commit.
I think that's true. It is also true that it's messier than that.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
like one of there was a phase where everyone in the world was inventing HTML5 versions of PowerPoint, and
Yes.
their
Prezi.
idea was you would just write down your story and then
Yeah.
upload it into the slides, and you kind of, but that's not how thinking works. Thinking works with your fingers and while you're typing, and you write a word and then you go, oh, that's not quite right, and that changes like the execution changes the strategy and whatever. But there's also a thing of a thing, I think maybe some of my habits around this are conditioned around the fact that I spent a long time thinking about advertising.
Yeah.
Is is I didn't realize how unusual it was when you write something to think about what people might think of it. Um,
So I'm
so
going to
it's
go on.
like the again, it's a PR and HR thing, right? Like they would show me stuff they'd written, and I'd go, "What do you think people are going to say when you send them this?" And they're like, "Well, I hadn't thought about that. This is what we want to say." It wasn't there was no thought of an audience.
So
Um,
I think I think this is really, really funny because I think it kind of mirrors my experience in this, which is we talked earlier. I asked you about, you know, do you talk with people about them thinking about the person that they're going to be communicating with a presentation or something like that, and then it comes back to this, which is that advertising and the PR about really, really thinking about. I remember this all the way going back to like GCSE English and being totally into. I'm thinking about the audience for this piece of writing and how they're going to receive it, almost to the degree that like you say, I didn't realize that I was doing it, or I didn't realize how important it was to me before I even started. And it
yeah, but I always slightly worry that when you get into audience and like um again, you give people an out. You give people like
Yeah.
a more fun thing to think about. So I'm
Right.
going to think about audiences and oh, I'm going to do a pen portrait and it's like what would it be like for a human to receive this message? You know, that like no do that work, do that hard work
Yeah.
of of imagining you'd receive that message. And then maybe I mean, maybe simple as like loads of the times it would be if you send them this, 100% of the people who receive this email are going to ask this question.
Right.
Why don't you answer that question in the
Yeah.
email?
Yeah.
It's just those kinds of just think for another 2 minutes, um kind of thing. Which I mean, again, I know it's hard and blah blah blah, and I think comes back to it's the Penn and Teller thing. There's like magic is just spending an unreasonable amount of time doing something.
Hmm.
Like good writing is just spending more time than you could possibly imagine
Mm.
doing it.
Yeah.
You know, like reasonable people wouldn't spend that amount of time doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the so maybe I've kind of been conflating this a bit because audience is like, or audience can sound like it means that the wider um if I think about it, if I try and think about how I talk about this with people, it is absolutely there is a person on the other end of this who's going to read it. um I talked about, because they are a person, they might be really upset, they might be really stressed out, they might not
mm,
have the time to read it, they are worried. Do you know what they're worried about? um, which I think ties into that. What's the question that they're going to ask? Do you know what's important to them? And when you think about that 100% of people, what are they going to want to know? Or what are they going to even assume that this email is about when they start reading it, that they're going to want to know?
yeah,
Um, and even just I think even just the human part, I would look at, I'd help people review inevitably, the update presentations that would get all the way up to a director, and then they include all this information. And they include things like burn down charts. And then we'd be able to sit down and say, do you think it's reasonable for them to understand what a burn down chart is? Why would they need to know about it? And what is this? What are you trying to show with this? Do we think that we need this, or we can say what you hope the burn down chart is showing, or obscuring, or in any other way, what's important to this person? Because ultimately, what's the decision that they need to make? Are you asking them to make a decision um, because you're telling them about something? Um,
yeah, yeah.
Clyde, how fast can you type?
I don't know. I've never counted. I mean, not very.
Um, Clive Thompson wrote this piece a long time ago that I recently put in my newsletter about some research that showed that if you can type faster than 60 words per minute, that is fast enough for you to get your thoughts out. And, the study apparently said that, for example, essays or arguments were much better constructed by kids who'd been taught how to type and could type faster than their peers. It was a way to kind of get that feedback out and to start thinking. It was like another method of thinking out loud that would allow you to, I say thinking out loud, that would allow you to think, that would allow you to interrogate. So I'm really interested in general now about, does it really matter? I know that I can type fast, and then sometimes it feels really splurgy. I'm just doing that. My newsletter is just a giant long stream of consciousness, and then every so often someone will say, "I'm very surprised that you stuck the landing there. I had no idea where this was going." And I get to say, I didn't know where it was going either, but I'm very surprised and happy about where it ended up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my version, I think my version of that is like I never wrote essays. Um, the first writing I really ever did was blogging.
Mm-hmm,
I learned to write by blogging, um, and you don't have to type very fast. And anything important-ish I've ever written has been in at least two mediums,
mm-hmm,
probably. It's been on a screen and then with a pen and then on some cards and then back on a screen and then,
mm-hmm.
you know, um, and I mean, my favorite writing experiences ever were at the government digital service in Google Docs,
Yep.
because you just have to, you'd put like three sentences on a screen and the other lot would make it better, um, and I used to love that. And and when I wrote books, I was always really surprised that you weren't allowed to do that. And that's not how it happened. You didn't work with an editor like that, or that you had to send them a manuscript, which they then would print out and annotate and send you
Like
back,
that. Yeah.
you know. I genuinely think that. the yeah, I mean, blogging and Google Docs are my favorite forms of writing, I would say, because they're not about. I mean, I agree, I think you're right about typing fast, but I'm not good or interested in typing fast or good at typing fast kind of writing, I would
Right.
say. Um, and mostly probably not interested in reading typing fast kind of writing. It's I like short things.
Mm.
It's kind of um, I like short stories, short poems, short people. It's kind of
um, was there a thing? What was there a thing about blogging where it felt more like you were writing for yourself then?
I mean, blogging's so complicated in that way. A bit like for me, video now, which
Yeah.
is that it is demonstrable that no one is watching, like
Hmm.
to the power, to the sort of statistically, no one is watching.
Right.
Um, but I think it was Clive Thompson who actually said it's the threat of an audience
Yeah.
is a slightly different thing. There's
Yeah.
something about the fact that someone could read it.
Right.
And Tom Stafford wrote something the other day about how even having a potential audience in mind makes you more likely to admit that you're wrong
Hmm.
to yourself.
Yeah.
The fact that like a theoretical reader out there makes it more collaborative, makes it more uh, makes you less certain, which I think uh, is good. Makes for better writing. Um, and then what happened with blogging, which is also now starting to happen with video, is
Mm.
that even though, I guess, again, there's a theoretical no one out there,
Right.
every now and then someone would say, "Oh, I liked your video," um, and you kind of go, "Well, you could have liked it actually, literally. That would have been helpful." But there's it's. I mean, like once a year, I get an email about one of my books from someone saying, "I liked your book," and
Hmm.
it's the most magical thing in the world.
It is
It,
really nice.
yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, it's weird how we're wired in that way, and I always vow to then tell another author, that I like their book, and then it's just too hard. Like tracking down authors, it's just too hard. But it's some of the same thing. And then what blogging had was bloggers talking to each other,
Yeah.
which was, you know, I mean, and it was a small,
Yes.
self-satisfied, very, very,
Yeah.
very uh, monocultural world. But
Mm.
yeah, I think interesting things came out of that way of way of doing things. It also created like I don't know what you'd call it, like some sort a form of writing, like modern casual plain or something, like a style which now irritates me, but which I'm very good at,
How does
So
it? Wait, wait,
it's
wait. How does it irritate you? What's irritating about it to you?
well, because I see all the. I mean, it's like a mirror of your own affectations, like starting sentences with and, just that kind of um
More
yeah.
speech, less written. Then. Hmm?
And it's weirdly hard to teach. It's like because a lot of corporates want to write that way. Um, and what they say is, "Oh, just write like you speak."
Yeah.
And it's like, no, don't do that. It's like in a movie, if you just put how real people speak in a movie, no one
Yeah.
would
No,
be
it doesn't
interested.
work.
Yeah,
No.
and it's a similar thing. But what they really mean is start blogging in 2003. You know.
That yeah, when people have asked me for career advice, I find it very, very difficult to give them anything useful because invariably because they're like, okay, well, how did you get to where you were? It's like, well, you should probably start in the late 90s or early 2000s, and hopefully the internet is a very different place, and then wait about 20 years,
Yeah, and be
and
born
see what
early enough to
happens.
get a be born early enough to get a full grant to go to university.
Right, right. Um, where was I? There was so we talked about, and I was kind of trying to get at this. We talked about how so your internal job at GDS was about presentations, which you kind of pointed out was actually about writing, which was actually about making the decisions or doing the thinking so that the writing could be clear. Was it ish?
Yeah, yeah, I was among the jobs they may have had. Yes. Yeah, yeah.
But that invariably, so people can see that as not your job. And if you come in and you say, okay, well, I'm about presentations, they can have a certain idea about what it is that you're supposed to be doing with, for, at them. Um, and then you need to persuade them. I mean, to be good at it, I imagine you need to be able to persuade them that their problem 99% of the time is, do you know what it is that you're writing about in the first place?
Yeah. Well, there was a bunch of different things. I would say most of the presentations we wrote weren't for us to deliver. So
Mm,
I got very good uh, at writing presentations for Mike, who was my boss,
right.
to deliver without him having seen them first. So you just can't, I mean, he had a rough idea of what's going on, but like again, there's a rhythm to that, you know, you can establish. So there was a bunch of that. We also did a lot of my job was being the only person there with any background in sort of marketing or advertising and stuff who
Yeah.
could therefore say, we're not going to spend any money on marketing or advertising. And everyone would be like, "Oh,
They would
okay, well,
suddenly pay attention.
he seems to know what, he's the one who knows what he's talking about. We won't
Right.
do it."
Yeah.
So when we started on gov.uk, there was a 10 million pound budget to launch
Hmm.
it,
Mm.
to spend on TV advertising because that's what all previous government
Yeah.
websites had done. It's like we need to tell people about this, so we'll do an awareness campaign and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I I mean it's weird, but I was basically allowed on my own to just go, no, I don't think we need to do that. And we'll just make all the pages, you know, we'll just make it so the old pages just redirect to the new ones, which
Hmm.
I didn't realize meant like 9 months work for like 30 people. But
And ultimately involved a lot of writing as well.
yeah, yeah. But there was a lot of just kind of being able to overturn a bunch of the default assumptions because, I broadly knew that area, but was also able to go, we don't need to do all this stuff, which a lot of, government is sort of beguiled by, sort of communications thinking.
Mm.
Again, well, you're seeing the same thing at the moment, but particularly at the time when Mike Bracken, who was my boss, our boss at GDS, was
Mm.
hired, the press called him the Twitter czar. Like that his job was going to be Twitter czar.
Right.
And because again, politics and journalism, when you say digital IT
Yeah.
computers, they
Yeah.
think you mean media,
Yeah.
not the essential infrastructure of life. Um, and which is presumably why now GDS has been put into DCMS, has been the departure of culture,
Hmm.
because they think of it as media
Right.
rather than, you know, life.
Or
Um,
the source of multiple of tens of millions of pounds worth of disaster.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So there's I can't remember how I got there, but yeah, there's there was about I did a bunch of it was like miscellaneous stuff. There were a lot of areas where I was mostly the person who knew about things that no one else was interested in broadly. So they sort of devolved to me, which but it also turned into in the second phase of GDS, so post the election or slightly pre the election. because I was the person in charge of presentations and things like that, I also became there was a phase where I was shopped round
Hmm.
government by
Right.
Jeremy Hayward, basically as a sort of park the bus exercise. It was like go on this useless quest, which we know won't work, to persuade every department to do a bunch of stuff which we know they're not going to do.
Right.
That is your job. Um, and you know, uh, sort of didn't really matter about the quality of the slides at that point. You know,
Hmm.
it was a old school civil service tactic of we're not going to let these people have this thing. We're going to make them present to every department until it becomes clear to them that they're not going to get it.
It when you say that it was part of your job or implicitly part of your job to know the things that other people didn't know and to kind of bring them together. I think that that is part of when I work with teams that people sometimes struggle with because there is that missing part, and either they need to start doing it, someone needs to start doing it to be able to do things differently. And do you know, I mean, like it feels like, a Russell shaped person can come in and then might be lucky to occupy the I'm allowed to know the things that other people aren't allowed, or you've got that agency or you're permitted the energy to be able to do that. And then when there is no longer a Russell shaped person there, then how much I guess it's a bit like, have you been able to inject enough energy across the rest of the organization or to those people so that they can start doing those things as well for a while?
Yeah, I think you, if it, I mean, it can't be one person, but
No.
um, I think you can create, like, again, the injection of energy, sort of all the molecules bubble a bit more, right? And it kind of, uh, that lasts for a while. Um, uh, and other people go, oh, I'm going to inject some energy then for a bit, you know,
Yeah.
that feels like a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
th-
there's also, sorry, go on.
I I think I found that because often I talk about someone has to go first,
Mm,
which invariably is which is kind of like another way of saying, well, if someone injects some energy, then there's a greater chance. It kind of like lowers the activation potential. It makes it makes it slightly easier for someone else to jump in. And also, I love the way of you saying, okay, well, if you heat up, like the whole point of heating up, you know, the gas or the solid or anything, then stuff starts jiggling around more. And that feels like another way of saying, then you can get people to talk to each other, maybe about things that they don't think they should be able to say. And invariably, that's going to help.
yeah, yeah, I think that's true. And I think there's something in uh the I mean a lot of the time, a lot of what we did, a lot of what I've done in a lot of organizations is again just like delete stuff, right? That it's just organizations get complicated really quickly. And when you signal that it's possible to get rid of some of it, people kind of like, oh, right, we can just not do that, or we can just
Mm-hmm.
take this away, or we can just remove that. Um, Again, they find it, I think it is quite energizing to realize that you can challenge some of the stuff that went before, or just get rid of it, or, like I'm working with someone at the moment, and we just sat in a meeting and said, why don't we just delete 50% of the website?
Right.
And if someone notices, we'll put it back.
We can put it back. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is just kind of you do need someone with the privilege or permission to say
Right.
those things.
Yeah.
And very often, I mean, again, at GDS, it was a lot of people who knew they were likely to be not there very long
Mm-hmm.
for one reason or another,
Right.
and decided to use that. I mean, partly like mischievously or angrily, or kind of
Right.
feel like we're gonna have a couple of good years at having a go at this,
Hmm.
but um, providing some cover for the people who were going to be there for a long time. Um, Arguably doing the harder thing, the more
Right.
patient thing, the less glamorous and celebrated thing. Um, but the combination is quite good. Like if everyone leaves, that's bad, right? But
Yeah.
you know, the when the mix works, it's quite useful.
That's also the whole, this the entropy thing is going to be sticking with me for a while because I've also been thinking about what I do and how I do it. And one of the things that I need to that I think I've started to remind myself about myself is that there are distinct phases. So there is you can be good at starting something. There are bad ways to start things. Like you say, you could start something and then everyone could leave and then it's not in a better place. But the job of starting something, or maybe the job of being a catalyst, and then you need to sustain it afterwards, and that's a different type of work. But being a catalyst can be important, and there are good ways, more successful ways and less successful ways, I think, of being a catalyst. And some of that I think is also, like you say, it can come down to the right kind of people at the right time saying, "Oh, fuck it, we're totally happy to burn some political capital. We're reasonably sure that we're going to do a good job of it, and we'll leave the place in a better place afterwards. So we think that it's worth burning it that way."
Yeah. And it was also, I mean, we should be clear, it wasn't like entirely altruistic or like it wasn't, it was a time in the UK economy where there was a bunch of talented designers, thinkers, and communicators who couldn't get any other work,
Yeah.
So um that kind of that helped, but imagined they would at some point, so
Right.
that's
Right.
kind
Yeah.
of
It was a jobs program in the lifeboat in a way.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yes. But oh, you reminded me of something. Uh, but I mean, Tom Loosemore, who a
Hmm.
mutual friend, always used to say, "Oh, Russell's really good for for the first 10% of anything." It's like a meeting or you know a company, and there is a thing of uh, I mean, I like change. Like a lot of
Right.
people don't like change. I
Yeah.
do, So um, in circumstances where that's required, it is possibly useful to have me around. But back to your opening, I mean, it's like I've done this for 40 years.
Mm.
I mean, arguably, like 10 of them were good, I'd
Mm.
say. That's probably a pretty good strike rate.
Yeah.
Like 30 years have been unsuccessful, frustrating, annoying. Um, um, but that's partly because I like change. So, if something's going well, I'll probably leave, So
That's a remarkably healthy way of looking at it, I think.
yeah.
um, Sorry, you were going to say something. Were you going to say
No,
something?
no, no. I'm just realizing how what saying I'm only good for the first 10% makes everyone realize they've wasted most of their time in this.
Uh, I guess that's why I said that was a remarkably healthy perspective for you to be able to take.
Yeah, yeah.
um, where was I? I mean, one thing that I can say is that it is 10:25 and we're coming up um, on the last few minutes. So if there are any burning questions that people have got that they want to sneak into chat, or even actually if they want to do them anonymously and just DM me, we can do that. And I can pretend that I've just said something smart, um, or just or just not attribute it.
Is this
Um,
just a way of attracting criticism? Because
yeah,
I'm not happy
yeah,
with that.
not happy about that. No, that's a whole different "why wasn't I consulted" type of feedback
Okay. Yeah.
that you're going to be able to get. Um, I thinking that's it's I I I find it weird to be able to tell people that it is simultaneously very simple and also very difficult and very complicated to do. I think that's one of the things that I've found over the last 25
You've
years or so.
you've reminded me of a thing
There we
that
go.
I used to talk about all the time, um, and I've forgotten to do for a while, but I must restart, which
Mm.
is the person who created basically the digital campaign for Obama's first election,
Oh, yeah.
um, was
Oh,
asked, how that happened, like how you do that, how do you get a digital campaign up and running, all that kind of
right.
stuff. And he said, it's not complicated, it's just hard.
Right.
And that that is the most useful thing I think, I've ever heard about a lot of what we are, broadly required to do.
I use that a lot.
And
Yeah.
it's part of the reason for that is people look for a way not to do that. They think I will find if I am so clever, I will find a clever strategic thing up
Right.
front.
Yeah.
Um, that means it won't be hard.
Right.
And like not hard is not an option. It's like you can't not have problems. You can
Yeah.
only choose the problems you're going to have. Um, and that, uh, but I think it's a problem. It's a consultant agency, whatever problem is that they promise that they will find a way to make it not hard.
Yes.
Whereas if they turned up and go, this is going to be a bloody nightmare,
Right.
um, but we will help, you might like you that might be more honest and viable, frankly. Um, but
That's
they're
pretty
like, we've
much been
got
my
to,
pitch when I reply to RFPs.
yeah, 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 yeah. I would buy that. I would buy that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's too many, now too many LLMs, but then too many 26-year-old management consultants who've got like, we've got a thing that says this is the way that it can be not hard, and
Yeah.
people keep buying it.
Yeah. Yes, I found it to be useful to just get straight to the point and say, if you don't want the thing that the 26-year-old management consultant at Deloitte has just written, then this one is it, and you don't have to read the rest of it. And then I will not pretend and I will not bother writing all of that stuff and responding that way. Simon in chat had a question about, does the maxim make it shorter apply to video too in the same way? And I have got a quick reckon for that before, uh, which is that frequently the films with the extended cuts don't feel as good as the ones that are shorter and tighter, um, or it's mainly just down to editing. Um, do you shorter video? Actually, no. You already said that you like shorter things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm alone in I have never been to a gig, a film, anything where I've thought, oh, I wish that went on a bit longer. Most gigs like 20 minutes. That is the ideal, you know. Um,
Mhm.
but I mean, but I mean, I say that. I think the thing I like about brevity is, I mean, I don't. It's not that I'm a fan of numbers under 60. It's that
Right.
I'm a I admire concision.
Yes.
I like I admire the skill of brevity of compression. Actually, I
Right.
think it's compression that. I mean, it's bad because I ought to like poetry, but I don't have the patience for poetry. So I don't know. Um, the thing I've loved about you TikTok is
Mm.
the the again the affordance of the editing tools.
Mm.
You can see what the algorithm wants, and
Mhm.
it's like kayaking probably on
Mm.
rapids. It's
Mhm.
like you can't go back upstream,
Right.
but you can find your way downstream in a kind of really smooth and interesting way. And I mean, and it's literally under your thumbs. It's kind of and it makes you cut stuff. It's like the tool is like too much, too much, too much. Take stuff out, and it's kind of I just think it's interesting. Um, I mean, and Matlock has this brilliant
Mm,
thought about what's happening is not that media is getting shorter, it's that
mhm.
all available lengths are now being explored,
Right.
basically. So it's like you've got Lord of the Rings and you've got Vine, and
Yes.
it's kind of or Red Dead Redemption and whatever. And the just that universe of very short things wasn't as explored before. Um, and I like it. I enjoy that universe.
I I love that thought about because I cannot tolerate the 3 hour YouTube essays. Um, but I'm glad they exist for someone.
Oh,
Um,
I don't mind them. I've watched those. Um,
mhm.
but you watch in a different way, right? You're like while asleep, or but
Yeah,
you watch in a they do a different thing. They're a different type of media object.
I'm going to wrap up with one thing. I nearly watched Mission Impossible 2, or I started watching Mission Impossible 2 with my teen, and it's got Anthony Hopkins in it with that wonderful line that was also in the trailer where he explains the giant complicated heist that Tom Cruise is going to have to do. And then Tom Cruise says, "Well, that's going to be difficult." And then Anthony Hopkins says, "Well, this is Mission Impossible. It's not Mission Difficult. Difficult should be a walk in the park for you." And I'm like, "I'll write that one down. That's a good one to use." Um,
You can also
so
use difficult, difficult, lemon, difficult from the movie version of the what was it called? Oh God, the Google difficult, difficult, lemon, difficult. That's what.
we'll do that. Um, Thank you so much for coming on, Russell. This has been a delightful chat, as
Yeah,
always.
thank you, thank
And
you, everyone.
yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
Nice
And
to see familiar faces and
Thank
a
you. Good to
familiar
see you
name.
always.
maybe see some of you back next week for the next show. Thanks, everyone.